In today's show, let's look at the best players for fantasy basketball. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Basketball is brought to you by McDonald's. Proudly serving communities since 1965, McDonald's has always been more than just a place for tasty and affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come together. We thank McDonald's, our friends at McDonald's, for sponsoring today's show. I am loving it. Guys, I also love that you make Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms. And of course, whatever your favorite team is, whether that's across the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, Major League Baseball, we have a Locked On show to cover that team. So go and check out your favorite team there. So what we're doing in today's show is looking at the best players for fantasy basketball. What we are doing here is looking at over the last 2 weeks. The season is 3 weeks old, basically. But over the last 2 weeks, and I think it's important to not look full season on stuff, is to get an idea of trends and where guys are heading up and down and that sort of stuff, is look at the last 2 weeks. We're going to do it for category leagues, Yahoo Points Leagues, and ESPN Points Leagues. Look at the top 20 players across this last 2 weeks of action in the NBA. Let's start with category leagues. At number 1, yeah, he's back. Nikola Jokic is the number 1 player. Again, familiar? Yeah, I guess it should be because he is number 1 once again. It's not a gigantic difference. In fact, he is number 2 just by a bee's dick over the course of the entire season, but number 1 over the last 2 weeks, averaging 25 and 13. The assists are still really low. Just 6 assists, which I know for a center's high, but for Jokic it's low. But he's hitting 2 threes, giving 1.1 blocks. He's giving 1.4 steals. He's shooting 60 from the field, so that's really elevated him up, and also 82% from the line. So he is obviously performing at a high level. He's, people who aren't watching Denver and think that, maybe he's not an MVP candidate, he's definitely an MVP candidate. He's been amazing once again for the Nuggets. At number 2, this man is the number 1 player for the whole season. He's number 2 this week, and that is Paul George. The Beatle is averaging 29 points over his last 6 games. Largely up this high because the steal rate is out of control, 3.2 steals, but he's hitting almost 4 threes, 7 rebounds, 4.5 assists. He's complaining about the ball and shooting, but he is hitting over 50% of his shots. He is at 86% from the free throw line, and he's hitting 42% from his threes, so it's obviously not bothering him a single bit. The steal rate will probably come down for him, and the efficiency, I think, will drop off too. But, the scoring, the usage, the minutes, all that's going to be pretty solid. At number 3.
Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, the big fella's in there at number 3 in a category league. Just bear that in mind. Normally, you see Giannis at 10th or so, then you punt free throws and he jumps up. He's 3rd, including his free throws, because he's averaging 29 and 10, 7 assists, 56 from the field, and 76 from the line on 8 attempts. Is it fixed? I don't know. He's also hitting 1.7 threes. Is that fixed? I don't know, but it's looking good. He's also averaging 2.3 blocks. So there's a couple of things there that I can see falling. The block numbers, 2.3 is a big number. And the 76 from the line. Yeah, that can pretty easily fall too. But Giannis has been great. This is why I thought he was a top 4 player. And yeah, because you can punt free throws and he's giving this value. But then if he hits the free throws, oh well, it's a bonus. And this is a gigantic bonus for you. And if you did draft him in a roto league, then you'd just be feeling pretty happy with how that's worked out. Number 4 is Kevin Durant, averaging 28 and 8, over 5 assists. He's shooting a gigantic 61%. Now, I do believe that, last week I talked about Durant on this show and said, I'm not sure what he's doing that's unsustainable. I think 61% shooting is unsustainable. He's hitting 68% of his twos. Now, maybe that falls down to 60%, but 68% and 60 overall is a gigantic number. And I just don't think that Durant's going to be able to maintain that level for the entirety of the season. At number 5, it is Steph Curry. Now, one thing we tracked with Steph is early in the year he was putting up really big rebound numbers. They've started to come down, and we've seen Steph's numbers drop. He is the third-ranked player overall, but he's fifth over the last 2 weeks, averaging 24, 6.5 boards with 7.5 assists. He's hitting just under 5 threes, but he's also got room to improve because he's hitting just 40% of his shots over these last 2 weeks. He's at 95% from the line, but 40% overall, and that includes just 35% from three. So it hasn't been the hottest week in terms of shooting from Steph Curry. Number 6 is Townsy. Karl Anthony Towns, he's the fourth-ranked player for the season. He's averaging 23, 9, and 4. What is unsustainable there? I think the 1.7 steals. He's always been a pretty low steals guy. But I also think he's 46.5 field goal percent from the field, which is obvious because I said field goal percent. I think that number has a real chance of being able to come up. And Towns is going to be in this 4 to 6 type of range, I would expect the rest of the season. So there's no real surprises out of this top group. I wouldn't have thought anyway. But once we head to number 7, yeah, well, that is a little bit of a surprise.
Jonas Valančiūnas.
Valančiūnas is killing it over these last 8 games. 34 minutes, 20 points, 14.5 rebounds. 14.5, a steal, a block, 55 and 90. Now, I look at all of those numbers. The 34 minutes stands out to me as probably being a little bit high, and eventually, when Zion Williamson returns, who knows when, eventually that will fall off somewhat, I think, and the 22 usage might go to 20, but 22 usage isn't high. It's not gigantic. The 90% from the line is something that I wouldn't expect to continue. The 14 rebounds might fall a little bit. I think he's just going to suffer some sort of incremental drops. So while I do think that Jonas Valančiūnas is a sell high would mean he is performing as a first-round player, and he may continue to perform as a first-round player until Williamson returns. But there is literally nobody out there who will give you a first-round player. And I think the type of player that you get back in a deal for Valančiūnas, like think about it this way. Would you think that someone in your league would give you Brandon Ingram for Jonas Valančiūnas? And the answer to that, you'll probably say no, they wouldn't. And then I would counter and say, well, I'd actually rather have Valančiūnas. So if your sell high is actually getting a player who might end up being worse, and that's Ingram, then you don't do it. So you just ride this out, you take first round value, maybe second round value until Zion returns, and you hope and think that maybe he can maintain even top 25 numbers after the big fella's back. That's what I would do. Number 8.
Fucking goat outside.
It's just a goat.
No, it's a fucking goat.
I know LeBron is injured at the moment, but that doesn't take away from the fact that over the last 2 weeks, he's averaging 37 minutes, 23 points, only 4 rebounds, thanks Russ, 7.5 assists, but his numbers are this high because of 2 things. 2.6 steals and 88% from the line. We want to talk about Giannis's free throws being amazing. LeBron at 88% from the line is not something you expect. So don't look at this and go, this is LeBron as a first-round guy. Obviously, he's hurt, and he's 7th over the course of the season as well. He's going to fall back from here because that free throw will drop off and the steals will drop off. The rebounds will come up, but those other 2 things will almost guaranteed, well, actually, no, definitely guaranteed, come back down. Guys, thank you to McDonald's for sponsoring today's podcast. We all know that McDonald's have been proudly serving communities since 1965, and it's always been more than just a place to get tasty and affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can reconnect. You know the memories of McDonald's. You have these memories. You have done it as a kid. You do it now with your kids or with your friends, and you take them to birthday parties, or you're driving home. People love when I improvise the McDonald's ads. When you're driving home from school and the kids are in the back, say, Daddy, take us to Macca's. You know, settle down, kids. All right, I could do with a cheesy as well. And then you're pulling through to Macca's, you get in there, and you see old Jono with his kids, little Billy and Tommy. Hey, you got little cheesies for those guys? Yeah, mate. Oh, how's life been going? Yeah, been going all right. And the kids are in there munching them. They're getting pickles out, throwing them out. Don't throw out the pickles. They're really good. Anyway, we all know McDonald's has been a huge part of our community for so many years. So why don't you find your local McDonald's? You already know where it is. Refuel and reconnect. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it. We know that being stressed is not great. We also know that sleep, well, if you don't know, sleep is a number 1 component to people performing at their best. Just ask your mate LeBron James. That's right. Sleep is his superpower. Calm is the number 1 app for sleep and meditation. And they have teamed up with LeBron James to help you activate the power of sleep. LeBron and Calm know that your mind is like any other muscle in your body, but you don't have to be a world champion to learn how to train it. Calm can help you train your brain so you sleep better, reduce your stress, and perform at your best just like LeBronald. As he says, getting good sleep and finding time to rest is one of the most valuable things that I can do for my body and mind. Agree, LeBron. From the sound of rain falling on leaves to bedtime sleep stories, Calm puts me to sleep within minutes, which means I wake up ready for any challenge. Unquote. Cool. So if you head to calm.com/lockedonnba, for a limited time, you'll get 40% off a Calm premium subscription. Again, for a limited time, our listeners can join LeBron in using Calm and get a 40% discount on a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/lockedonnba. Unlock content to help you focus, ease stress, and sleep better. Get started at calm.com/lockedonnba. That is calm.com/lockedonnba. Okay, let's go through some more in the top 20 of category leagues. And number 9 is this bloke, Miles Bridges. Whew, he's killing it. 9th ranked player over the last 2 weeks. 8th ranked player for the season. He's averaging 25.5 points per game with 8 rebounds. And I look at this and I go, what is actually going to change? 25, 8, and 3. 1.6 steals, 1 block. All right, 25 points might become 22. 1.6 steals might become 1.4. 48 and 85, there's nothing outrageous there in those shooting numbers. 38% from 3, why not? 25 usage, maybe, or 26 usage, maybe that comes down. But he's so good. Again, a sell high on Miles Bridges means give me a top 7 player. I wouldn't take anything less. But Bridges is only 9th. I don't care. Unless I'm getting a better value than what I could... If I can squint and say, well, Miles Bridges could actually be top 10 the rest of the way. I'm not saying he will be, and I don't think he will be. But if I can look at it and go, why not? Then why not? I just hold him and roll with it. And then if he falls off, is he going back to being the 90th ranked player? Almost no chance. There will be cold streaks for sure. The shot will stop falling. But he's found ways to contribute in so many different areas, which has been awesome. Number 10 is Jim Butler. One of the big reasons he was ranked so high last year was a huge steal rate. And, as I always say, there's big variance in steals, but it hasn't varied for Butler. He's at 2.9 steals again, averaging 25 points with 7 rebounds and 5 assists. Now, that is the big change, though. If that goes to 2 steals, he drops 10 spots. So be wary of that when considering Jimmy for the rest of the year, but he's done it now for a year and 3 weeks here, this gigantic steal rate. And it is obviously helping his numbers. While Anthony Davis is at number 11. Hopefully his thumb's all right. 24 and 12 for Davo. 2.4 blocks and 80% from the line, which is key considering the struggles he has had from the free throw line last season and earlier this year. These last 8 games, he's hitting his free throws. He's back into being a first-round player. He's still not pushing right up to be right at the top, but it's an encouraging sign. And then number 12, I didn't think he'd be here. DeMar DeRozan. He's been ridiculously good. Over the last 7 games, he's averaging 28 points. That's insane. 6 rebounds, impressively for him, 0.9 threes. 4 assists, no defensive stats. So it really is just coming on the back of that scoring, which he's doing at 51 and 91 from the field and from the line, which is a gigantic true shooting of 61% for someone who doesn't shoot 3. So there is going to be, I would imagine, some level of regression in the shooting, but it's only 53% shooting from the field from 2-point range. It's not outrageously high. Maybe the 32 usage comes down, and maybe that's probably the more likely thing that drops off for DeMar. But he's been really good, and he's firmly established himself as the second, if not first option on this team. Let's just roll through the rest of the top 20 now. At number 13, it is Jimmy Harden. After all the struggles, he's 13th. Right? And he's doing that on under 40% shooting. That's going to come up. He's only averaging 18 points. You get to 24 points, get to 45% shooting, then you're back as a top 5 player. Number 14 is Ja Morant. He's fallen from where he was last week. We talked about this extraordinarily high steal rate for him, 3-point rate and field goal percentage, and they have started to come down a little bit, and his free throws are back at 73%, unfortunately. So that is a little bit of a worry. They're not saying he's going to be outside the top 100 like last year. Didn't project him to be that this year. But the top 7, top 5 sort of guy he was before, maybe there's a fall-off. 15 is Chris Paul, on the back of over 12 assists per game and 2.5 steals. It's like Ricky Rubio on steroids there. Yeah, really just assists and steals. He's not doing much else. He's not hitting threes. His shooting numbers aren't great. His usage is low. And then 16 is Al Horford, the oldest farts in the world, at 15 and 16. Horford, how's he doing it? Well, he's averaging just 13 points. So that is 3 guys here who aren't averaging 20 points per game. Harden, Paul, and Horford. How is Horf doing it? Well, it's a way that I don't think is going to stick. 2.9 blocks and 10 rebounds. He was never a big rebound guy and never this sort of a block player. The 2.9 blocks go back to 1.1, which is distinctly possible. Then he goes from the 15th ranked player to the 70th, 80th ranked player. Be aware of that. Now, that is one that if I could get a top 40 player back, I would sell high on Horford. Number 17 is Malcolm Brogdon, who returned from his hamstring injury to now be out with an illness, or questionable with an illness. He's averaging 21 points over his last 5 with 8 rebounds and 6 assists. He's doing it without much defensive stats, although the 0.8 blocks is high. That'll come down. The worry you have with him is injury and the fact that he won't maintain 96% from the line. Number 18, another guy who's currently injured, is Donovan Mitchell.
He's done. He's good.
The ankle injury, hopefully not too severe. 33 minutes, 26 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds. Those numbers for Don, like, they're not crazy for him to continue. Maybe the 3 threes per game is, but he's only doing it on 42% shooting. Like, a top 20 season is a distinct possibility for Mitchell, and that'd be great. Number 19 is Bam Adebayo. It's not coming through assists. We know that, 2 per game, but 20 and 13 is great. 91 from the line on 7 attempts is awesome. He went from being, remember, a 60% free throw guy at one point a few years ago. Now he's really hitting those, and his usage is up. And then at number 20, after all the hand-wringing about the struggles, Fred VanVleet's there. Freddie, over the last 8 games, is playing a whopping 39 minutes, which will drop, maybe. 20 points, 5.5 boards, 7.5 assists, 3 threes, 1.5 steals, 48 and 75. Now, maybe the field goals come down, but I think that the steals will go up. So really, really good stuff from Fred to get back into the top 20 after some early season struggles. Guys, it might be a struggle to keep your weight under control because Halloween, why do I say it? Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is coming up, and you know there's so much delicious food at Thanksgiving. So, Built Bar, maybe that's the answer. Instead of having that calorie-dense slice of pie, which most slices of pie are over 300 calories, have a Built Bar. Just 130 calories in most bars and only 4 grams of sugar. Just a ridiculously delicious, healthy dessert alternative. So replace your coconut cream pie with a coconut Built Bar. Get a raspberry Built Bar and replace your raspberry pie. Built Bar can be that option, and bring it to your family gathering. Okay, guys, Thanksgiving, I'm giving you Built Bars. It is a great way to have something absolutely delicious, a delicious protein bar that is low carb, low fat, low sugar, but high in protein, and keep those costly calories out of your mouth. So, with all of the great flavors, you can find something you love, and there's going to be new limited edition flavors happening all the time, plus big Black Friday sales as well at Built.com. So head to Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and save 15% off your order. The promo code is LOCKED15 at Built.com. All right, let's go to Yahoo Points Leagues now and look at the top 20 players over there. At number 1, it is Giannis Antetokounmpo, averaging 55 fantasy points. He's obviously been really, really good, and his points league value is doing a really, really good job, which I know is just terrible English. We've got Nikola Jokic comes in at number 2, averaging 53 fantasy points. Number 3 is Paul George at almost 52, and number 4 is Anthony Davis, averaging 51.4 fantasy points. So some good numbers for those guys, putting up some really, really good performances for Yahoo Points Leagues. Number 5, we do have Kevin Durant. Number 6 is Steph Curry. Is he? Yes. Number 6 is Steph Curry. I'm just checking this out. Oh, no. Is my list wrong? I think my list is wrong. All right, so apologies about that mix-up. The top 4 were correct, but here is the correct list for the rest of it. At number 5 on Yahoo Points is Jimmy Butler at 48.16. Number 6 is Kevin Durant. He's averaging 47.51 fantasy points. Now, I think Butler's probably going to come down from there. I think Durant could actually improve from there, so maybe those guys switch. I think Butler actually drops a little bit from that number. Number 7 over the last 2 weeks is Miles Bridges, averaging 46 fantasy points. Now, that's really high. I do not think that Bridges is going to be able to maintain that level. And I think he's a higher ranked player in category leagues versus points leagues. But he's obviously flying, and the same thing I said earlier on maintains. I probably wouldn't sell him, to be honest. Number 8 is Luka Doncic, averaging 45 points. 45 and a half. A little bit of a disappointing result for Doncic after drafting him in the top 3. I am not 100% convinced he gets back to that 50-point fantasy mark, which he's probably going to need to be in the top 3. Maybe he does, but he's obviously a little bit away from that at the moment. Number 9 is DeJounte Murray, averaging 45 fantasy points over this last 2 weeks. I think that there is going to be somewhat of a drop-off there from him, but perhaps not. Number 10 is LeBron James, Number 11 is Karl Anthony Towns, who I think could be better than this. Number 12 is Russell Westbrook, averaging 45 fantasy points. But the difference between Murray and Westbrook there is 0.2 of a fantasy point per game. It is really sort of squished up in this range. In fact, between Doncic at 8 and Morant at 14, to spoil the next group, it's like 0.5 fantasy points between like 6 or 7 guys. So let's talk about the next bunch of players. Number 13 is Jonas Valančiūnas. Number 14 is Ja Morant. Again, another 45-point guy. Number 15 is Steph. Number 16 is Rudy Gobert. 17, DeMar DeRozan on the back of that really high usage and scoring. 18 is Julius Randle, who's fallen off from where he was last week. Number 19 is a crucifix Christian Wood. And then number 20 is Chris Paul. You notice names like Trae Young, Brad Beal, Joel Embiid, Sabonis, Harden. They're not in here. They're not in the mix. They are not performing up to expectations for this season. I think you're all well aware of that. So let's look at ESPN points leagues now. The number one player on our ESPN points leagues is, of course, Giannis Antetokounmpo again, averaging 59 fantasy points. He is just performing at a spectacularly high level, and he's streets ahead of the next guy, which is Nikola Jokic, who's at a bit under 58. Paul George is at number 3, averaging 55, so a big drop-off there. 4 fantasy points between number 1 and number 3. And then Kevin Durant goes at number 4, and he is 5 points behind. So there is a gigantic gap between Antetokounmpo, Jokic, and George, and then the next group of players. And that's where it squishes up a little bit. But those top 3 are really, really separating themselves. At number 5 is Jimmy Butler. He's at 49 fantasy points. Number 6 is Anthony Davis on 49. 7 is Miles Bridges on 49. And 8 is DeJounte Murray on 48. Now, I do think that Bridges, Murray will drop off a little bit there. Maybe, I think the other guys like Butler and Davis can sort of stick around that mark. But I do think that Bridges and Murray will drop somewhat from there. At number 9, it is LeBron James. Number 10 is Chris Paul on 47 fantasy points. I think that there will be a drop-off there from Paul. His steals and assists are sky high. Number 11 is Townsy. I think he can jump up from there, maybe another 3 fantasy points or so per game. He's at 45. And Steph, I think, could drop another 6 per game. He's at 45 there. He should be able to crack the 50 mark. So a little bit of a down moment there for Steph. And the last group of guys, number 13 is Ja Morant. 14 is Jonas Valančiūnas. 15 is DeMar DeRozan. 16 is Fred VanVleet. 17 is Al Horford. 18 is Russell Westbrook. Number 19 is Luka Doncic. That's, again, another big disappointment if you drafted him up high. And number 20 is Domantas Sabonis, with names like Harden, Trae, Randle, not in that top group. Devin Booker, not in that top group. And, of course, the disappointments of Lillard and Jason Tatum especially. So that will do it for the top players in fantasy basketball over the last 2 weeks for category leagues, Yahoo Points Leagues, and ESPN Points Leagues. Don't forget to follow this podcast. And again, sorry, I apologize for that stuff up in the middle of the show. Really, really bad stuff on my behalf. I apologize. Guys, follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app. But if you're here on YouTube, thumb it up, leave your comments down below. Guys, we're done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.